What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 120 of the FlipScreen Games Podcast, a weekly video game podcast where two best buds from different nations come together to discuss the wide world of video games. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Steven Radford.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Steven. What a week. What a week we got here.
Yeah, I know it's a sad week, a very sad week in gaming, a very sad week for Sony in general, really.
Yeah, it's kind of a downer note for our last proper episode of the year, but it's a juicy one. So, if you're a fan of the news deep dives, it's a big one because Insomniac, of course, the team most recently known for their work on Spider-Man, Marvel Spider-Man 2, has unfortunately been the victim of a massive hack that has, very, very encompassing, right? I think the major headline that is getting pulled away from it is, of course, that pretty much the entirety, right, of Wolverine 2026 has leaked online, as well as a roadmap that shows the studio's plans for basically the next 12 years or so. But I think most importantly, right, is uh, a good amount of personal identifying information for employees at the studio seems to also be part of that leak, which is obviously as much as people are, I think, reacting and getting excited about the tidbits of news and everything that come out about something like this. I think it's really important to remember that human cost and like how messed up it is to do something like this.
Yeah, so last week, this group, Riceda, who are known as a ransomware group, they first reared their head in March 2023, put out on their dark web website that they had hacked Insomniac. They put a screenshot up with a bunch of files, passports, screenshots from Wolverine, and they said, unless he gives 50 bitcoins or around $2 million, we're going to leak everything on the web. And today, 7 days later, they did exactly that. They put it up, Sony didn't pay up, and now everything is available. 98% of the files were leaked. It looks like there's some possibility that the passports and the personal information of the developers at the studio wasn't in the public leak.
Yeah, and was just
Um,
instead sold to somebody who can now steal their identity.
and yeah, that it was sold. So they said that the data that wasn't sold, they uploaded, that was 98%, which is around 1.67 terabytes, 1.3 million files that people are now trawling through.
Insane, insane. And you've got some statements here from Rice City. You want to read those?
Yeah, so,
Riceda.
Cyber Daily, when I'd have no idea how you pronounce it. It's a centipede, right? But I don't know, is it Riceda, Ricida, Ricidia? I
Let's
have
say
no idea.
it's not. I think I said Cydia, and it's not because it's just an A at the end. So
Mhm.
we'll go with Riceda. I guess that's how you say
Okay,
it.
so Ricida gave some statements to Cyber Daily, which is a publication that reports on these ransomware attacks all the time. And in an email, they said, "Yes, we knew who we were attacking. We knew that developers making games like this would be an easy target." And they also said that the hack itself did not present much of a problem. And their spokesperson said that we were able to get to the domain administrator within 20 to 25 minutes of hacking the network. And they and when posed with the question that Sony was investigating the incident, they said that Sony has launched an investigation, but it would be better in their own backyard. I think implying that they really should close up whatever hole Riceda used in order to hack them.
Yeah, which I think is probably fair, right? Because I mean, this is obviously not the first time Sony's been hacked. There was a hack they were the victim of earlier this year that affected personal information for some of their employees. Um,
There was the hack with The Last of Us Part 2, that all of
right.
those files got leaked as well.
Yeah, and then I mean, obviously, years ago before that, back in what 2014 now, quite a
Mm.
quite a long time ago now, but that was when the Sony Pictures division was hacked as well, and there was that massive email leak that led to a ton of different stories and drama. So yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that Sony doesn't have the best track record when it comes to cybersecurity, and, that at this point, maybe they should, have kinda plugged up some of those holes after being the victim of multiple attacks. I think that's certainly fair to say. But, like, they're far from the only, folks who've been targeted, right?
Yeah, so we had other developers, like last year, Rockstar, right, with GTA 6. That was like a leak through some basic kind of manipulation, managing to get onto their Slack.
And there was,
But
like, 2
Riceda
teenagers in the UK who ended up getting arrested for that one,
yeah,
right?
they ended up getting arrested. Riceda seems to be a much organized group. They seem to have ties with Russia, coming out of Russia. So at least that's what the US government seems to think. And they've targeted people like the British Library. They want tried to get like 300 grand out of them.
They,
There
like,
was a
shut the website
hospital
down for, like, a few days, right?
a good while. Yeah, there was a hospital that they targeted and threatened to leak people's medical information, including members of the royal family, if they didn't pay up. So these people kind of they stormed onto the scene in March, but they really are just like targeting anyone and everyone. They pitch themselves as like a group who are trying to help you, that they found a security hole in your network and they want to make sure that you can kind of tie it up. And in order to do that, you pay them the 2 million. They won't leak your files, and they'll also tell you how they hacked you. Um, but when
Yeah,
they
and of
got
course,
asked,
really, really cool way to do that is to threaten to do that by sending them pictures of their passports and then acting like you're doing them a favor. It's like, come on, guys. Like,
hmm,
let's be honest with ourselves, right? Like, you guys are extorting people for money,
yeah,
and if that's what you're doing, why don't you just be honest about it, right?
I
Like,
mean they're
you're
pretty
visibly
honest with.
extorting people and leaking information illegally. Either way, let's not try to act like you're a legitimate business. Like, come on.
I mean, when Cyber Daily asked them what their motivation was, they were pretty blunt and honest about it, and they said that money was the only motive for the attack.
Right.
So it's pretty clear they're just doing this to make money, and they're clearly very good at it as a group.
It's,
I'd
like,
imagine
so
there's a good few of
disappointing.
them.
It's so disappointing to me, like, when you hear stories like this just because, like, to have that skill set and, like, use it to just do this overtly malicious shit is, like, so disappointing.
Do you
You
feel
know, you
like feel like a superhero, you gotta use your powers for good?
Yeah.
Spider-Man was not very happy about that.
Yeah, I'm not, right? Like, I'm just saying, like, it's like, you could be hacking, like, you know
You could be going Edward Snowden on it, you know?
Yeah, and, like, using those powers to, like, actually, like, do something productive and not just, like and especially like this, like, to go after, like, PlayStation, fine, right? And to be like, "We're gonna leak, footage from Wolverine or this or whatever," right? Like, that's, like, already not a cool thing to do, right? Like, I don't think that, you should be hacking into people's servers and leaking, footage from their games, right? It's a crappy malicious thing to do, right? But to leak, like, people or to sell people's, like, identification is such an evil thing to do to a person, Like, that is just, like, you do not give a fuck about other people to be doing shit like that, and I think that's just it's disappointing, It's like, just be better, you know?
Yeah, it is surprising. I mean, I'm surprised we didn't get a statement from Sony other than the fact that it was 7 days ago they put out a statement to Eurogamer saying, "We're aware of an attack." That was basically the statement they put out.
Yeah, they said that
I
they were aware of the attack and they had no reason to believe that other studios had been affected at that time.
Which is like, come on, where's the statement from Insomniac? Where's the statement from Sony? Where's the kind of, the message that we got when Rockstar was attacked, which was like, we're really disappointed. This is not how we wanted you to see our game.
Yeah.
Everyone here has been really badly affected by it.
I
Please
I would
don't share all this data around.
I would imagine that the reason that that isn't happening is because Sony's lawyers are telling them not to comment on things, and maybe that's different because I know that we've had instances in the past where studios like Insomniac, right, have put out statements independently of their parent company, and sometimes at odds with what their parent company has to say, right, and like have been like, well, this is how we feel, and like it is what it is.
Well, yeah,
So
that was the whole thing with Jim Ryan, right? When it was
right,
came to
exactly.
the abortion stuff in America.
Exactly, right, so it's not like that can't happen, so, like, theoretically, I guess Insomniac could say something, but I would imagine the reason that they're not saying anything is because they're afraid of some legal liability, right? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if the fact that like they've been the victim of multiple sustained attacks that have led to people who work there's personal information being leaked um is potentially actionable, right? Like, I don't know enough about, I'm not a lawyer, I don't provide legal advice or legal commentary, anything like that, of course. But I would imagine that as an employee, you have a reasonable expectation that your employer will take, reasonable action to protect personal information or personally identifying information, like things like your social security number or your medical records or things like that, right? Like, I imagine that the fact that now they've had sustained attacks against multiple studios where people have been affected in the same way and they've not taken action, right? Is potentially something that they could be sued for by their employees. Or at least those who've been infected, right? And I wonder if that is the reason that they're being quiet is because they're trying to um, mitigate damage.
That would be
Not to
I mean,
justify
that
that
would
as
be
a
my
choice,
guess,
but
yeah.
that's my
It's
assumption.
it's weird to just stay silent when I see developers from other PlayStation studios on X talking about it. Neil Druckmann expressing his support for Insomniac, for example, but we hear nothing from Insomniac themselves talking about it. I thought we would have heard something, but there's no reason to doubt the legitimacy of this leak. It's not like they need to come out and be like, "Yes, obviously this
Yeah,
is a
right. We were the
legitimate
victim of a
leak," you
leak.
know?
It's like, clearly I looked at, I've seen a terabytes worth of information circulating on Twitter.
Yeah,
So, deeply, yeah. It's one of those things where it's like, what can they even say? Right? Like, it's like, yeah, like we got hacked and
it's a sad day. Yeah,
Sony
really, really
didn't pay the
sad.
money. Sad day, right? Like, okay. Yeah. I mean, I imagine
Do you
we'll hear
think
from
do you
them.
think the thought of paying the money, um, crossed their mind?
I
Maybe
think you
just
probably
pay
have a
the
discussion
2,000,000?
about it, but I think that there's like a real it's like the "we don't negotiate with terrorists" thing, right? Like, it's like
Mm.
if you give them the money, what stops them going and being like, "Okay, we did it at Naughty Dog. Okay, we did it at Sony Santa Monica. Give us another 2,000,000. Give us another 2,000,000." Like, you're emboldening them to keep doing it. You're showing that
At
it's
this point, I'd be, like, clean rooming on my studios. I'd be cutting off their internet connections, making sure no one can get
yeah.
into my networks until I can figure out how this leak
And that's what they
happened
should be doing, right? Like, that's
and
what they should have
how
done after Naughty Dog.
yeah, and how they can stop this kind of shit happening again. Because like, I sent you a link, when I was looking into and doing some research on Reseda. There's software that they could have installed that would have identified this ransomware being downloaded and executed. Essentially, what it does is it runs some command line files in the background that you don't know about and slowly goes through every single folder and every single file and uploads it to their servers and then leaves you a PDF behind saying you've been a victim of a really critical leak, a critical cyber attack, and you can pay us, and we'll tell you what happened. It's terrible, really terrible.
Yeah, yeah. So, our hearts go out to the folks affected, right? Like, and I think obviously, like we said, the people who have like had their information potentially stolen and sold or whatever, like, are obviously the folks who are the most affected. But also, like, I really feel bad for the people who are working on Wolverine right now, where this isn't how they wanted their game to get revealed, right? And it's like there's a lot
Well,
of
yeah,
stuff.
we've had other games that are coming out next year that we had no idea about. That the kind
Have
of
had their moment
surprise
spoiled.
reveal now it's been ruined.
Yep. Yeah. So it's obviously a bummer, right, for everybody involved, and I'm a big fan of Insomniac as a studio, right? I really enjoy their work, and Spider-Man 2 is one of my favorite games this year. So I obviously I wouldn't want this to happen to any studio, but it's especially disappointing to see it happen to a studio that um makes such high quality stuff that I like so much. That like to have that moment taken away from them is a real bummer. You know, so you know obviously that is the highlight here, right? Is like this is not cool, and I am upset because I am excited to talk about some of the stuff we're going to get into here, but it is a real bummer to have this kind of stink on it. This negative this anti silver lining to this, right? Um yeah, it gives me no pleasure to report on this stuff in this way, which is a bummer. But there are some really big implications here that speak to conversations you and I have been having ongoing for the last year, and I think we would be remiss to not talk about them. So, um,
Mhm.
I'd
Yeah,
like to
but yeah,
shift gears
there's a
and
few things, right? There's like
yeah.
the whole and I guess if you don't wanna know about any of this stuff, if you wanna you don't wanna hear about any of the stuff related to the leaks, now's your time to drop off because we will be talking about
And
some
I
of it.
will say, I wanna give context of what we'll be talking about so that you can be comfortable knowing where the line is for you as an individual, and you can make the informed choice to jump out now or stick around for the talk. So, right now, we won't be spoiling any details of story beats. We won't show any footage. We won't show any design documents. So if you don't want to see anything, that's fine. Like you will not see anything. However, we are going to talk about the leaked timeline of games that is, seemingly detailing Naughty Dog's, or I'm sorry, Insomniac's efforts up until like 2035 or whatever. So if you don't want to know about that game that Steve's talking about that is going to come out that hasn't been announced, we are going to talk about that sort of thing. So, where the line is for you, obviously, no matter what, it's cool, right? So if you're going to jump now, thanks for joining us. If you're going to stick around, let's get into it. So let's talk about what we've learned, right? Uh, as I said at the top, basically all of Wolverine has leaked. The full cast of characters, gameplay footage, stuff about traversal. There's some early animations and some leaked cutscenes and stuff. There is a vertical slice of the city of Mandrapore that is about 20-ish minutes. So it's like it's the bosses, like basically everything. You can read the whole plot more or less.
Mhm.
It's very similar in scope to what happened with the Last of Us Part 2 leak, where it's like the whole game's out there now. So, you know, uh this is mostly a PSA for you to, if you don't want to see any of that stuff, then I'd go mute some words. I'd stay off Twitter for the next couple days, do what you can, right? Let me ask you this, Steve. Have you seen any of it?
Oh, yeah, I've seen a ton of this.
Yeah, I have too. What do you think?
It I mean, I think what I've seen, the game looks really cool. I'm less interested in the game and what it looks like at this point. I think people looking at it and going, "Oh, it doesn't look very good," or "This doesn't look right." It's like, "Come on, man. Why are you
That's
even looking
dumb.
at it in the first place?" But, like, also for me, it's the, like, internal documents, the design documents, the kind of how they go about making things in the same way that
Yeah,
I was really interested in the internal documents during the FTC leak with Xbox and when they uploaded all that stuff, right? It's the stuff you don't see, the behind the scenes, the business dealings, the learning about a new roadmap, learning about like there's all sorts of stuff in the design document for Wolverine about how they want characters to clothing to have like bunched up stuff and things like that. How you would gather reference images when you go out and about on location. All of that stuff is so cool to me. Um, and it's the kind of stuff I watch GDC talks for. And I'd
yeah.
imagine this is the kind of stuff that I would see at like a GDC talk, but this is like an internal presentation. I didn't look at the vertical slice. I haven't really looked at any of the gameplay stuff because I don't really want to, I don't think. The cast was interesting to me, specific people in there were interesting to me.
I'd see it's so funny because we looked at opposite stuff. I didn't look at that because I don't want to know. I don't want to know
Oh,
what characters are in it. I
I
want
don't
to
know any
be
of the people, I just know
right.
the actors, I don't know the characters, so
So okay, yeah. So I'm being like, I want to be surprised by the characters that show up. I don't want to know the plot. Like those are the things that are uh unique to me, right? And it's like those can be spoiled. To me, looking at the not finished gameplay footage, I get that same kind of reaction that you're talking about with the art stuff, where it's like, it's just kinda cool to see how the sauce is made, right? Where it's
yeah.
like, when
Yeah,
I
yeah.
when I get to the point where I get to boot the game up and I can see, you know, uh, the systems in action, it's gonna be cool to think back and be like, "Oh, yeah, like, I saw that when it was wireframe," and it was like, they were showing you, like, how traversal worked, and it's like this is a slight spoiler, um there's like a scene where they're showing Wolverine Like,
I have seen that gun at the wall and in the window,
yeah,
right?
he's like you're like
Yeah.
going to investigate a cat. I won't say the character, but you're going to investigate it like an apartment, and you go and he jumps and puts the claws in and climbs up the wall, and then you get in there and you use like it's like a detective vision, like from Arkham or whatever, where like you're using Wolverine's sense of smell to like try to identify like when the person was there and where they might have went, and some of that kind of stuff, like looking for clues. And I'm like, oh, like you can see how that loop would play out. And it's like, that's great. Like that's the stuff I was, interested in checking out. So
Yeah,
yeah, I
see, for
mean,
me, it's the opposite. I like all the production stuff, the behind the scenes. Like, there's like we obviously know now from the leak where it's all set and stuff, which is, I guess, something we didn't necessarily know before.
that was something that had been leaked earlier as well. Like one of you remember a while ago there was like those rumors that came out about Wolverine, and we're like, we don't know if they're real or not, but this is kind of what people are thinking. The it taking place in Madripoor was one of the things that was part of that leak reveal, whatever that was. Not a reveal, but you know what I mean.
Hmm.
An
Yeah.
insider was sharing that. And now we know that's true, right? 25 minutes of it, you can see. I haven't seen that because I couldn't download it.
No,
Uh,
but you can tell that it's based in that kind of area based on, like,
some of the art
you
and
look at
stuff.
the design documents and the art styles and the neon signs and all of that stuff, you kinda know where
See,
it's
and it's
set
like
based
all
on.
that I really wanted to look at, but I'm like, I don't wanna look at it because it's gonna spoil things. I don't wanna know
It
what
actually
character.
doesn't. So
No? Okay.
that all it shows you is, like, pictures of, say, like, bamboo scaffolding and how they wanna take pictures of that, those
Okay.
reference images, and turn that into actual assets in the
Okay, I can look
game,
at that then.
and what they should be doing to make those assets. Like, when you're making clothing, make sure it's all bunched up and scruffy and not, like, perfectly smooth and stuff. So
That's
it's
cool.
like pointers for artists when they're working on the
I
game.
I think my big takeaway here is, like, I'm just so excited for this game. I know that it's super disappointing for them that like this information is out there and that people are going to be spoiling themselves on the plot and everything. And this is all stuff that they would want to not be out there. Um,
I kinda hope they legitimately release a trailer now, or
yeah,
the vertical slice themselves,
something,
and they're just
something.
like, but I hoped that with GTA 6, and we had to wait a very long time for that trailer, so
Yeah,
maybe they don't
and
want
it's like
to.
don't rush, right? Like don't react to this and put something out too soon. But it's like, yeah, I don't know. I hope that the reactions that I've seen that are positive are at least of some solace to that team to see like, hey, at least people are excited about what we're doing. Like, like you said, there are obviously people who are looking at it and bitching, but it's like to me, those are the same assholes that complain about like the reflections and the puddles in Spider-Man. It's like I'm not interested in that person's opinion. Like at the end of the day, if I'm honest.
Mhm.
I think the vast majority of people are probably looking at this and being like, "Man, this is gonna be a fun game, huh?" Which I hope that at least gives them a little bit of peace of mind, because I can't wait. Can't wait for it. It's a bummer that it's in 2026. Was hoping that it was gonna hit that 2025 release, that they originally had planned, but say la
Well,
vie.
I guess we don't know, maybe it will, maybe it won't, they might pull it up.
I
There's,
don't
like,
think so.
several documents, and we don't know the timeline of them as
Yeah,
to
I
which
think I
ones are
do
right.
though. I think I've proved the timeline. Let's walk through it. You let me know if you disagree. But so I have two timelines that I'm going to take us through. And again, I'm not sharing these images. I don't think it's right to um, publicize this stuff. If you want the visual element, you can go check it out yourself. But we'll walk you through it. So there are two timelines that have been found. I'm going to take you through the simplified one first because this is the one I think is the more recent one, and I think this is like the one that is actually representative of what we're going to see or what the plan is right now anyway. So it is a timeline that goes from 2023 to 2032, and it shows in 2023 Spider-Man 2, Marvel Spider-Man 2 coming out, right? Obviously, that just came out this year. So to me, that signifies that this is either a timeline that was made this year or that was made at the end of last year, projecting the next couple years ahead. In 2025, it shows a Venom spinoff, which is something that, you know, um, I theorized, right? After playing Spider Man 2. Spoilers for that game, I guess. There's a segment of it that led me to believe that they were working on something involving you playing Venom. I kind of originally thought it would be like, maybe a DLC, but maybe it's like a Miles Morales type thing where it's a shorter
Which
experience.
would make sense looking at some of the other documents, right? Miles Morales was a financial hit for them, because
Huge.
it costs a lot less to make using the same engine, the same setting, the same everything. It's just one of those smaller titles, that kind of Sony really started with, Uncharted:
Yeah,
Lost
and the
Legacy.
return was great for them on that one, right? You were saying like it made a huge
It was
profit.
a 120% return, so it was a massive profit
It's great,
compared to something like Spider-Man, which I think was at 30%.
which is fine, but it's definitely a lot less. Um, so then after that is 2026, we have Wolverine. Then 2028, they have Spider-Man 3. 2029, they have Ratchet and Clank, and it just says Ratchet and Clank. There's no other identifying information. And then 2030, they have X-Men. And then there is a slightly different graphic. Like each one of those is like a red line going from the date to the logo. Then they have underneath like 2031 to 2032 is kind of just like a big red box underneath those 2 years, and it just says new
Mhm.
IP. So I think there it's kind of like the estimation is that somewhere in that window they will release a new IP.
See, so
So
I think the other timeline is the accurate one, the roadmap extended that I've popped in the document, this one, because this is from the same document as the X-Men license terms, which were the what you thought were the newer license terms, and this one doesn't mention, um, Venom, but has Wolverine in 2025, Spider-Man 3 in 2027, X-Men in 2029, a new IP in 2031, X-Men 3 or to the power of 3 in
yeah,
2033,
it looks like it's
and then
X-Men to the power of 3, but I think the implication is that it is a 3rd X-Men game.
and then a new IP in 2035. But then they also have like a multiplayer timeline, which I'm wondering, based on the news we're going to talk about in the back half of the show, if we get to it, um, if that's completely out the window now with Spider-Man 2 online, Wolverine online, and X-Men online.
And the other thing that's interesting about that is with the X-Men Online, it's showing that it is, they have multiplayer 2 point so it's weird. It says multiplayer architecture, like they're working on their multiplayer architecture from 2021 to 2020 into 2024. Multiplayer 1.0 is in 2024 with Spider-Man, multiplayer 2.0 with Wolverine, then multiplayer 3.0 with Spider-Man 3 and X-Men, but X-Men Online is listed as coming out before the X-Men game, which is interesting. Here's the
It's
thing.
it's also it's also worth noting at the bottom of that first document, it says calendar years are shown above. So it's quite possible that both of the timelines are correct. That we have calendar years on one of them and fiscal years on the other, which would push Wolverine into fiscal year 2026, but
Sure,
it
but it
would be
doesn't
coming out in 2025.
explain the games that are absent from the list though, right? Because
No.
and I don't think I think the one that you're looking at right here is the and I have that same timeline below, right? I think that's the newer one because it is when you look at it, right? The one I was just referencing that I just walked us through, that starts in this year of 2023. The one that
Mhm.
you just referenced that has the 2 new IP, the 3rd X-Men game, and all the online aspirations, the multiplayer aspirations, that starts in 2020. And it includes Miles Morales, Spider-Man Remastered, and Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, as well as Spider-Man 2, right? It's possible that they are contemporary to some degree, but I don't think so because to me, this shows that those projects have moved around, right? I am not super prepared to speculate on the multiplayer side of it just yet. We can talk about that in a minute. But you look at this list and it is roughly the same number of games. It's just different games have been added, right? In
Yeah.
this timeline, Wolverine comes out next year, Spider-Man 3 comes out in 2027, an X-Men game comes out in 2029, there's a new IP in 2031, an X-Men game in 2033, and then another new IP in 2035, right? And instead, you have one new IP, Venom, and instead of a third X-Men game, you have Ratchet and Clank. I mean, to me, like, I think it I feel confident that this is the older roadmap because it not only has, this older timeline here, right? Like it to me, it shows that this was made in 2020 or maybe even 2019.
It can't have been made then because they didn't sign the license agreement until 2021. So the X-Men license terms wouldn't have been finalized until
Okay, but
2021.
still then that makes sense though, right? Because then that would include this is our most recent release. This is what we're putting out this year, and then this is what we're doing moving forward, right?
Mhm.
So
When was
I
Wolverine
still think this is
announced?
older.
Was Wolverine announced last year?
I'll look that up. Hold on. I don't totally remember the timeline on that.
Because my guess is it was last year, not 2021. So they probably had these plans in place, but they clearly had ambitions and plans ahead of time. And I do want I mean, my guess would be all the multiplayer ambitions are cancelled. I don't think that strategy worked for Sony, and I don't think it's going to moving forward.
I am inclined to agree. I think the idea that they're working on 3 different games like this, I don't see it. I really don't. Um, Let me see. I cannot find where it says I can't find the reveal trailer because everything I'm searching is coming up with all the new information. Okay, it looks like it was revealed in God, this is a fake trailer. I hate you people. Stop it. I can't. I can't find it. It's some point in the last 2 years, right? Um, so with that, yeah, I think that the timeline we're looking at with Venom and everything else involved, to me is I think makes more sense because I don't think that I think that the Venom idea coming into play later makes sense, right? Because if that was made in 2021, based on the timeline that you're suggesting, they wouldn't have known maybe how much of a hit Miles was going to be financially, or the fact that they had had the time to develop a gameplay system where you play as Venom, right? So to me, the idea that in that timeline they were like, okay, this
Or they were
multiplayer thing
planning
is
to spend all this time on Spider-Man 2 online, and that's not gonna happen now, so we've
yeah.
pivoted and gone back to single player. Wolverine was announced September 2021, so it would make sense that this document was probably from 2021. I had a look to see, when Insomniac was acquired, and I think that was a little bit before this. So, that
Yeah,
was in 2020.
I was gonna say I thought it
So
was 2020, wasn't it?
yeah, so my initial theory was this was a document because it starts at 2020, right? That this was a document that was put together by Sony because it's like got the PlayStation Studios logo on the bottom to talk about the acquisition of them, and there's probably a bunch of other documents to talk about that. There's like financial
I
stuff,
mean, it's
financial
possible too that
reports.
that was part of the pitch for them to make the agreement with Marvel, right? Because the thing that you're describing as well in there, I was going to talk about later, but we can get into it now. It breaks down the licensing agreement that Marvel and Insomniac have entered, which basically it breaks down a lot of the financials and everything. Like it's like how much money they're going to spend, how much is going to be committed for development of the game, how much is for marketing, yada yada. But they say here that the release will have all games in the agreement released by 2035. See all games through at least 2038 and later if Marvel allows us to continue. So I guess it sounds like there will be an opportunity for them to maybe renegotiate and to continue making Marvel games at that time. But this takes us through, like the next 12 plus years, basically.
Yeah. Which I think this document, the extent roadmap extended, is just Marvel stuff. I think that's why we don't see Ratchet and Clank
Why wouldn't
coming
you
out
see
in
Venom though?
2029. I
And
mean,
and
whether
it says to new IP, right? So it's like,
but
is
that could
the
be a new Marvel IP
it
because they've
could.
got the X-Men stuff. That could be like another X-Men offshoot. Maybe we get something with like,
It
I
could,
don't
but
know, name another X-Men character.
why
Storm.
wouldn't
There you
you
go.
just put
She's going already.
X-Men to the 3rd, 4th, and 5th power then? To just show
I
that
don't
we're
know, but
gonna be
where's
doing stuff with
X-Men?
X-Men
Where's
now.
X-Men 2? That's not there.
I mean, that's the I think that's the point though, is that like people are looking at this and assuming that, oh, that means they're making an X-Men team game. I don't know that that is what it means. Because if it
I
says
think that was
X-Men,
probably X-Men Online was the X-Men team game.
maybe, but my point is though, right, that like it's Wolverine, it's X-Men, and then it's X-Men 3. Right? So it's like, is the implication there that that is the third X-Men game made by Insomniac, or is it that it's a series? I don't know that that's the case
Mm.
because you could very easily have it be we make a Wolverine game, we make a, I don't know, Nightcrawler, I'll say, just for the sake of giving an example, a Nightcrawler game, and then they make an X-Men game where it's a whole team or whatever. Or it could just be that they make another game about a third X-Men character. There are like a hundreds of X-Men that you can make games about. So it's like that could mean anything. And it could be a trilogy of Wolverine games just as easily, right? Wolverine, has a
I don't think you then have X-Men Online as a title if you're not making a Team X-Men game.
and
Like,
again, it's
I
like, is
think
that the question? Is like, was X-Men Online, quote unquote, the second X-Men game? It's possible, right?
yeah,
Like,
it is possible. Yeah, that could be the second X-Men game. I mean, looking at the exclusivity, it says that X-Men characters can appear in multi-family Marvel games,
yeah, so
such as
let me read that part
the
specifically.
Avengers.
It says between now and December 31st, 2035, Marvel cannot release or announce any X-Men games on console, PC streaming, or use an X-Men character as a competitive advantage in a game. Example, play as Wolverine in Ultimate Alliance exclusively on Xbox. X-Men characters can appear in multi-family Marvel games, e.g., Avengers, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Marvel retains rights to children's games and certain X-Men games from the 1990s, but they cannot release or announce these within 45 days before or after release or announcement of any of our X-Men games. So essentially giving them a exclusive license on new X-Men stuff moving forward, unless it's in the context of like a broader Marvel team up property, right? Like I guess you could have an X-Men character cameo in like a Guardians of the Galaxy game or be like a member of the Avengers or something like that, right?
Mhm.
Um, they break down some of the royalties, they break down like the termination rights and everything. It's pretty standard, right? But like
The
basically,
royalties were interesting to me, though, that Marvel gets a bigger slice of physical games than digital games, which again points towards Sony's kind of push towards digital only, that they
digital,
don't even
yeah,
have to give as big a slice to Marvel on those games, and they own the marketplace, so they get the lion's share of the cash anyway.
makes sense.
I've got a comic book question before we move on.
Go for it.
You know how if you're in the Avengers, you are an Avenger? If you're
Yes.
in X-Men, does that make you an X-Man?
Um, like yes, but they don't really say that. It's like you're a member of the X Men.
Okay, so they didn't come up with a good name for it, so they're just a member of the X-Men.
Yeah,
You're like a member of the Avengers, but you are an Avenger. That's such a
yeah.
much better name than an X-Man.
I think that the important distinction there too, though, is that like the being a member of the X-Men is like a way different thing, right? Because like the Avengers are specifically like a crime fighting team, whereas like the
Mhm.
X-Men are part of a broader organization that also involves just like a school and like mutant rights organization type efforts, right? So it's like there are definitely a lot of people within the kind of like X family that are not superheroes. They just are children that have powers, right? So it's like yeah, you know, doesn't help that it's
I like that.
men too, which is, like, inherently gendered, and it's like there
Yeah.
is a very large percentage of X-Men that are not men, so that's a whole other thing, but, yeah, you gotta yeah, they play it fast and loose with that part a little bit, I guess. So let's take a minute to like talk about what we know about some of this stuff, right? So the Venom game that's supposed to come out next year, we got a slide about it that kind of talks about what it's going to be. It says the game is called Venom Lethal Protector, which is awesome. That is a reference to a famous Venom storyline, kind of where he like made the switch from being a villain to being an anti-hero. So speaks to what we'd be doing in that context, right? I'm imagining
Mhm.
that's Harry going out and trying to do some positive stuff. Um, and it's an all new storyline that continues Spider-Man 2 and leads into Spider-Man 3. Again, that makes sense, right? That sounds like a Miles type point 0.5 game, which is cool. It says playable, switchable Venom and Spider heroes, which I think is interesting. Is the implication there that you're playing as Venom, but you can also switch to Spider Man?
Or is it like you swap between Peter Parker and what's her face, and she goes on a mission and does stuff?
Yeah, I don't know.
Mary Jane.
And then it says Carnage infected NYC Burrows is going to be part of it, right? So that's another thing that was kind of established in the main game, and something that I figured we would explore in DLC or a spinoff. Natural, I think, conclusion for anybody that played the main game there. They said it's an 8 to 10 hour standalone experience. The Golden Path is 12 major missions with 3 event bosses, and then there's the standard side stuff that you would expect. So yeah, I mean, it to me, it sounds very much like this is going to be a Miles Morales style experience.
It's like it could be a DLC, but we're putting it out as a separate game, and we're gonna charge you, like, $50 instead of $70 for it kinda thing, or
And beef it up.
$60 instead of
Like,
70.
because again,
Yeah.
like I think a DLC, usually you expect that to be, 2 to 3 hours or something like
I
that,
kinda
right?
feel like
Where
the lines have been blurred with Cyberpunk this year in that you can put out a DLC that they call an expansion, and it can be a really beefy, lengthy thing,
I think that's the
and
thing though. An expansion, I think, carries a different connotation than I think anyway, right? Like
I don't think they exist really much these
they
days.
use
They used to be huge.
totally, totally. And I think when I hear it's like a story expansion, I think of that as being, oh, that's bigger. It's like a new camp, it's a whole
Mhm.
campaign. And I guess you're right. Like you could do that with this, but I think it's the difference of like the City That Never Sleeps DLC for Spider-Man 1, I think was $30, right? And it was probably a similar amount of time, but it came out in episodes like over the course of a year. And I
That was a
imagine
really, really dark time for video games, the episodic nightmares that were the original Hitman
And I just think that, like, it
trilogy.
shows that that doesn't work. It's tough to maintain
No.
interest over episodes. I don't think as many people show up for it. It gets treated as inessential, whereas, like, Miles Morales showed that, like, that's a slam dunk because it's a new game and it gets treated like a new game. So it's
Mhm.
like, I think it's a double-edged sword where or not a double-edged sword. I guess it's like a dual-pronged approach where it's like, I think it's probably more financially viable to put out a game like this, and I think you get a little more bang for your buck as a player, right? Because it's like you're talking about a $10 difference between what you probably would have paid for a DLC for
Yeah.
what is
Yeah.
overall a more satisfying experience, I would argue.
You usually gotta spend a bit more on marketing. You gotta put out another physical disc because obviously that's part of their agreement that they've gotta do physical versions. One thing I thought was really interesting from these slides is I don't know if you've been noticing, some of them are confidential, some of them are secret. There's, like, different levels of, like, clearance you have at Sony in order to have this information,
Like,
which
this
is
is a
really funny to
secret,
me.
so, if you
This is a confidential one,
a
but
couple people find out, it's fine.
the extended timeline was secret, so don't tell
Okay.
anyone.
That's because it's not real anymore, that's why. It's just his extra. So then Wolverine's the next year. We already talked about that plenty. Let's talk about Spider-Man 3, because the timeline that I'm working off of, right, says that's coming in 2028. So that's, um, what, 5 years from now, right? Which is seems a little soon, honestly, but fair enough. Um,
Well,
it's
they're
interesting.
saying that it's a possible, like, holiday 2027 in one of the slides.
Which I think is crazy. But I think that's probably based on the original timeline where they thought it was gonna come out then and Wolverine was gonna come in 2025, and it seems like everything's been pushed back a little.
They have this, so I don't know if you've seen this document, which is an interesting one. Um, it
You
talks
gotta
about
stop
maybe
pasting
splitting it.
links to things I have in the document, Steve. Just
Okay,
scroll down. It's right here. It's right here.
okay, which
Read
is
what I
really
write. What do
interesting.
I put the
It's really
notes together for? If you're not gonna look at them, you son of a bitch.
do you buy this approach that it's like a two-part game?
So that's the thing. This document, what I was about to get to is that one of the things that they say is a pitch for the idea as a two-part series and them spending $400 million across those two games. And I mean, in the document, it says Spider-Man 3, single title, holiday 2027, estimated lifetime units are 15 million, right? Blah, 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 blah. And it has that crossed out, and it says the ROI there is 50%, has that crossed out. And then it has Spider-Man 3 as part 1, holiday 2027, same release date. Part 2, holiday 2028, and then day and date with part 1 would be a multiplayer that launches, which we'll talk about in a
Mhm.
minute. And then they would put out a combo, like a full version of it in 2029. What I find interesting about this as well is in the initial pitch, where it's a single title, they have it marked at $70. For the part 1 and part 2, they have it as 50. So it's in that same lower price range as um, Miles Morales or ostensibly Venom or whatever. Uh so my question is there, right? Like, what do they I guess what's the expectation there? Like, is it should we expect that it's going to be, if this comes to pass, right, which I think is debatable at this point. Um is it
I
that they're
could
putting
see
out
it, to be honest. I
two
really could.
parts that are shorter, like 10-hour type experiences like Venom or like Miles, or are they two games that are closer to a full length title and they're doing that to, you know, get more out of it, right? My question is though, it's interesting because in that, right, like I said, there's the return on investment at 50%. They have it broken down for these others where they say part 1 has an ROI of 41, part 2 has a 16, the multiplayer has 10%, and then the combo is 100, but then they have for total it's 30. I'm like, I don't
Well, I guess the ROI on the combo is we've already done the work. It costs us $0, which is why the ROI is more than 100%, because they're saying that
okay,
we're
I'm with
checking this
you.
out.
Yeah. Yeah, gotcha.
Whereas the other ones, it costs us this much to make. We're gonna get 10% back of it, in terms of the contribution that we get back. Interesting though that it was gonna be a single title targeting holiday 2027. And, you talk about the multiplayer, there is that other slide that you've got, which is seemingly from the same document because it's got the same background. I'd be interested to see if the full document does get is included in the leak. It probably will be. I zoomed in a little bit on the side slides, and there's this market opportunity one where it looks like that might release on PC day and date. That it might be a title that is that because they could talk about the PlayStation market
Which one are you
opportunity
looking
and the
at?
PC market
Is it the
opportunity.
one that has the 3 images with the pictures
Yeah,
of Gwen?
yeah, that's the one. So
Yeah,
it's no, so it's this one here,
the
the
second one, the other
one
one.
the one I got highlighted here. Yeah.
I gotcha, I'm looking.
And then if you zoom in on slide 6, sizable opportunity of 12 million day one addressable market, upside 70 million. So I would imagine they're talking about PlayStation and then the PC market and whether they do that
Yeah,
day
they have a
one,
PC market in, like, a separate bubble,
a
basically.
separate bubble, but
Um,
they're like there's the plus together with all three of the current Spider-Man games in the screenshot.
so let's talk about this for a second, because that's the other part of this, right? Is in addition to the two-parter thing, right? Obviously, we mentioned there's, like, the multiplayer slide that they have. They talk about there's this other document I have that it or both of these, right? The one Steve's just referring to. It refers to something called the Great Web, which is they say it is the GTA Online for Spider-Man. There's a multiple slides that we have kind of a screenshot of. It says a spider hero for every player, a welcoming neighborhood, the ultimate NYC sandbox, a multiverse that matters. And I mean, it very much seems to be pointing to the Spider Verse of it all, right? And that was something that was hinted at in the last game, right? And
Mhm.
um, yeah, definitely something I thought we might be getting to when it comes to the next Spider-Man game, but not necessarily thinking of it as a multiplayer property. But yeah, I mean, they have some concept art for like what Spider Gwen could look like. They have a bunch of screenshots of different Spider people. Like they have a few different shots of Gwen. There's one here where they have the Scarlet Spider. There's one that looks like it's the Punisher in like a Spider-Man outfit. Um, there's like a Venom type costume. They have a couple pieces of concept art that look like they're screenshots from comics, and it's like a T-Rex with the Venom over top of it. It's the 1960s Spider-Man cartoon, and then Spider-Man Noir. Um, there's like a bunch of spider people like swinging towards a big enemy. It looks like it might be a giant rhino. Looks like there's Madam Web there, maybe like playing with some of the universe thread stuff. So I mean, there's a lot here, and it's like you could see that, you could see the vision for that, right? With Spider Verse and that kind of being a thing that's on the in the public consciousness right now. Um,
It's all just concept art though at this stage. Like if you look at the company that's referenced on that Spider Gwen
yeah,
slide, it's a company called Volta who do um who do artwork for a bunch of studios like EA, BioWare, Amazon, THQ Nordic, Ubisoft. They are concept artists.
right. So yeah, so it's something that's like at this point doesn't seem like it's probably that
Like, it
far
could get to
along.
this stage, and then it could be like, well, we explored the concept, we looked at the financials, because the other slideshow was a financial one. There's like the speech at the bottom from the financial director at Insomniac Games. Could be that we explored it, wasn't it worth doing? We didn't go down that route with multiplayer, and we kind of canned it.
We're gonna put a pin in that for right now, Steve, because I want to jump ahead and talk about what's going on at Naughty Dog before we finish the conversation about what's happening at Insomniac, because I think it's relevant to this bit of the conversation. But before we do that, let me remind you that this episode of the Flip Screen Games podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of December. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, aka Sobi, Pilkey, Snackago, Steve Stompy, Ty the Dude, Susan Loves Cats and Boobies, and Wakahula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/flipscreengames. You're all the reals to the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. If you want to go and show your support just like they did, if you want to go check out those sister shows, if you want to write into the show and get involved in the many, many ways that you can, head over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you will find links to all the ways you can get involved all over the web and much, much more. Head over there, click on some stuff. It helps us out a whole lot, and it won't cost you a pretty penny unless you want to go above and beyond to show your support on patreon.com/flipscreengames, where you can get all kinds of cool exclusive perks and goodies, including early access to the show. However you choose to get involved and show your support, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Flip Screen Games Podcast. Steve, The Last of Us Online is canceled. And I am interested in what that means for Sony's multiplayer aspirations.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
originally I'm thinking we talk about that later, but I think in the context of the Spider Man stuff, I'd like to jump ahead so that we can bring in what they've said here for context. So I'm going to read this, and then you and I can have a conversation about how we feel about this and Sony's multiplayer aspirations moving forward in light of this update. So, Naughty Dog posted to their blog an update on The Last of Us Online. We realize many of you have been anticipating news around the project that we've been calling The Last of Us Online. There's no easy way to say this. We've made an incredibly difficult decision to stop development on that game. We know this news will be tough for many, especially our dedicated Last of Us factions community who have been following our multiplayer ambitions ardently. We've equally crushed at the studio. I'm sorry, we're equally crushed at the studio as we were looking forward to putting it in your hands. We wanted to share with you some background on how we came to this decision. The multiplayer team has been in pre production with this game since we were working on The Last of Us Part 2, crafting an experience we felt was unique and had tremendous potential. As the multiplayer team iterated on their concept for The Last of Us Online during this time, their vision crystallized, the gameplay got more refined and satisfying, and we were enthusiastic about the direction in which we were headed. In ramping up to full production, the massive scope of our ambition became clear. To release and support The Last of Us Online, we'd have to put all our studio resources behind supporting post launch content for years to come, severely impacting development on future single player games. So we had two paths in front of us: become a solely live service game studio or continue to focus on single player narrative games that have defined Naughty Dog's heritage. We are immensely proud of everyone at the studio that touched this project. The learnings and investments in technology from this game will carry into how we develop our projects and will be invaluable in the direction we are headed as a studio. We have more than one ambitious, brand new single player game that we're working on here at Naughty Dog and cannot wait to share more about what comes next when we're ready. Until then, we're incredibly thankful to our community for your support throughout the years. So,
Mm.
I find this deeply unsurprising.
Oh, yeah, same. I kind of assumed that we didn't even need a statement at this point, that they'd already put out the thing before that where they basically said we paused the production on it. Like I kind of thought that was the end of it then. But to have this kind of crystallize the end of Jim Ryan's legacy of trying to pivot PlayStation to live services and completely failing. We had the Bungie layoffs, the fact that Destiny has just been a complete disaster for them this year. We've now got Naughty Dog saying that we didn't even realize when we ramped up to full production, whatever that means, how big of a project it was going to be, and the whole studio would have to become a live services studio. It's just insane to me that this even happened, that this it was even possible to happen.
It's almost like we were right, Steve. It's almost like games as a service is an unsustainable business model and that it's about catching lightning in a bottle and trying to repeat that again and again, and that it's a losing strategy.
I think it can be a winning strategy, you just have to do it right. Like, I do think there are some live service games that have succeeded. There's the Fortnites, right? They're the pillars, but then there are the smaller titles, the Hitmans, the Forzas, those kind of things I consider live service games.
Yeah, but I don't think that works in AAA, right? Like Hitman was considered enough of a failure by Square Enix that they let that studio go and
Mhm.
take the IP.
Yeah, I mean, some of the decisions Square make are strange, you know, offloading all of their Western studios for
I don't
in
think
like
that is that strange,
a
though. We talked
5
about it.
star.
Those games have historically not sold well. They're critically successful, but they do not sell. And like we as enthusiasts don't want to talk about that enough, right? Where it's like, why don't they make this? Why don't they make that? Why is it? Because they make what makes money. And you can
Yeah,
say
and
that you
apparently
want,
Marvel's what makes money over
yeah, but
Insomniac.
again, is that surprising that Spider
No, it's
Man
not
makes money? It's
surprising.
Spider Man.
I was surprised how little Ratchet& and Clank made, though. And obviously that's because it was a launch title on a console that there wasn't really enough out there, and then it didn't have the staying power that they really needed it to have. But the Spider-Man remaster made them money, and it granted it was half the budget. It was 40 million instead of 81 million, but I would have thought that they would have made that money back. They should have put that game out on PC sooner, or they should have held that game and released it at a later date when they had more of these consoles out in the wild, because they kind of put that thing out to die, and now it's seemingly we're not gonna get one until 2029,
I don't
and
think
their
those are
focus
related
was
though.
on
And that's
live
the thing is,
service.
I don't think those are related. I really don't. Like I think they knew that it was gonna underperform because that's what happens with launch games. And I think you bet on that with Ratchet and Clank because you know that Ratchet and Clank is what it is. And it's not a massive unit system seller. It's a game that is for the PlayStation diehards that are already there who bought the PlayStation 5 early. And we bought it and we liked it, right? I think
Mhm.
they knew that. And I think you saying the like, oh, ostensibly that's why we're not getting one until 2029. I don't think that's true. I pulled up a tweet here from Jason Schreier that I wanted to reference, right? This was back, I'm trying to find the date on it. This was in January, beginning of this year. He said, fun fact, video game production cycles have gotten so long that if a big budget game studio started working on a brand new project today, it would likely be for the PlayStation 6. So that means one of two things, right? This game is that far out because when they made Rift Apart, they had no plans to make a sequel, right? Because they knew that the next things they'd be working on were Spider-Man and then the next couple X-Men games, right? Because they had signed that
But I don't think
deal,
they knew about the X-Men games until 2021.
right? But that's when Rift Apart came out.
Rift Apart came out in 2020, right? When the PS5 came out.
No, no, it was not a launch. It was a launch window game. It was not a launch date game. It's
Oh,
2021,
okay. Okay,
right?
interesting. I mean,
My
you might be right. I didn't have a PS5 on launch day. I know Spider-Man came out day and date, so it's
No,
quite
it came out
possible.
in June 2021. So
Yeah. So
the
they would have
idea,
known then.
yeah. So like if they had plans to make another Ratchet and Clank game, it would have already been in development and it would be on this timeline, and it's not. So
Mhm.
I don't think that it's because Ratchet and Clank underperformed. I think it's because Spider-Man is such a massive hit and they're taking another swing doing the X-Men stuff where it's like, look, and it's also like, let's be real. Like, do we need them to make multiple Ratchet and Clank games a generation when we already have like 15 of them?
I would have liked one. I'd have liked a Rivet
I
game. I
I
really
would
would have.
have too, but I think that like there's an argument to be made that like that is not the best use of their time as a studio, right? That like the financial returns are not really there for Ratchet and Clank, and I think creatively the well's kind of been explored. Like it's like not to say that there aren't like I was into the idea of getting like a Rivet and Kit style Miles game. I'm into the idea of another Rift Apart game. I like that game a lot. And also, I recognize that it's a formula they've been cashing in on since the PS2, and that like the idea that maybe Insomniac wants to spread their wings and work on other stuff and doesn't want to spend more time developing another Ratchet game, but is
Mm.
fine committing to doing one for the PS6. I think that makes sense actually. Because not only
I
from a
I I don't know,
financial
man.
standpoint, but from a creative standpoint, because getting to make a Wolverine game is something new in the same way that getting
No,
to make
I
a
agree with you. I
Spider-Man
mean,
game was something new, you know?
it's the same thing of when the Campo Santo team joined Valve and they all stopped working on the game they were working on, and they all shifted over to working on Half-Life Alyx or whatever projects they wanted to work on. And I
Yeah.
remember seeing a bunch of the team there tweeting once Half-Life Alyx came out, it's right, this was the dream. I got to work on what is ostensibly Half-Life 3, which is really fucking cool. I think what is a massive waste of this studio's time and talent is chasing that multiplayer dream that Jim Ryan seemingly shoved down everyone's neck.
I'm so glad you brought that up. So let's circle back. Do you think there's any chance that any of these games come out? Because I don't think there is.
Yes,
Because
I think that web one looks like
far
it
enough
could.
along.
Because we had a Spider-Man 2 online. That's obviously not gonna happen. They seemingly have shifted to this Spider-Man: The Great Web that could be a game that could then potentially integrate other characters from the Spider-Man universe that we don't know about, that we haven't seen yet, and they could build upon that
Do you
in
think
the
that actually
future while
happens though? Because
working.
I don't. Like when you look at the statement from Naughty Dog, why is it different for Insomniac? They're not going to pivot to becoming a
Well, they
multiplayer
also
studio,
didn't say it was a live service game. They said it was like a multiplayer game. It could be like a boxed multiplayer
but they
experience,
compare it to GTA
$70.
Online. That's
Yeah,
live
true.
service. Like that is a
Yeah,
game you have
very
to
live
support.
service.
You know,
What I don't
it's
understand is
possible, I
why there's
guess,
just
but
not like another studio set up to go, here, make these games. ZeniMax did it. Had great success with Elder Scrolls Online. Why are they not doing the exact
we're
same
seeing the
thing?
inverse of it now too with that Supermassive is making that Dead by Daylight single player
Mm,
game. It's like, yeah, let the single player studios make single player games, right? And that's I guess my question is like we've been talking about how it seems like Sony is pivoting away from live service. That was maybe a Jim Ryan era thing, and that now they're pulling back because they're seeing that that is riskier than they thought. And like, I wonder, is that a thing that they want to bet the future of Insomniac on? Because right now, Insomniac is like the golden goose, dude. They've put out how many games in the last couple of years that have made massive profits? Like them making
well, I
single
mean, some of
player
them made massive profits, some of them made losses,
but
but yeah, I get your
not
point.
the PlayStation ones, like Rift Apart, yes, but that has context, right? We know why that didn't do as well as it could, and we know why Spider-Man did way better, why Wolverine will do way better, and why any of the other Marvel stuff that they do will do way better, right? Because not only are these great games, they have the built-in install base of people that fuck with the character, right? And with Spider-Man, Spider-Man's the most popular superhero in the world, right? Wolverine, right up there. So, like,
Mhm.
the idea that those games will come out and be a critical success and a commercial success, and then something that they can pivot to be like, okay, we made Wolverine. Now let's make a spin-off game in the same engine and like go through that whole song and dance. I wonder if that's not a more profitable model for them.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't
Look
know
at the
what their
return on
strategy is gonna
Miles.
be moving forwards. Yeah, I agree, but it looks like that was their approach anyway. They had the Venom stuff on their timeline, but they were also had these multiplayer aspirations, and like,
No, they
is
didn't
this
though. Those
great?
are two different
But
ones.
but
The
the
new
Great Web
timeline has
thing,
Venom. The old one
it
doesn't.
does, but the old one also doesn't have the Great Web, and the new one doesn't have the Great Web. We don't know
That's my
where the
question though.
multiplayer stuff
What if those
fits
games
in.
are canceled? Because
I mean,
in the extended timeline that you're listing, it has those on the timeline and it places them in the context of their other releases, right? And like
mhm.
based on you said this before, right? Like the Spider-Man 2 multiplayer was supposed to come out. Like, I don't think that's coming out. Do you?
No, I don't think that's coming out. I
So if
think
that's
we
not
get
coming out, like I just I feel like that puts that whole timeline into question.
I mean, I think all of this is kind of in flux, it's
For
nothing
sure.
solid, nothing's been announced, there's, like, everything changing. These pitch
Okay, wait.
documents
I got
with
another thing
from
for you though, because you also made the point of, is one of those X-Men games an online game? There's one less
mm,
X-Men game on this timeline too.
yeah, but their agreement says they have to make 3 by 2035.
Does it say they need to make 3 games?
Yeah.
I don't see that. Where does it say that? It says release all games by that date. And
So it's like
it says this stuff about them not putting out other games or whatever, but I don't see anything about the number of titles they have to do.
no, fair enough. And they're just putting a shitload of money into all of the games.
And if there was a number of games you needed to put out, it's one less X-Men game, but Venom is in there. So that could be it too.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
I think it's interesting. I really wish this just wasn't even the thing that we were talking about, not just because of the hack, but also because of the fact that I just do not think these studios should be making multiplayer games unless that's what they really want to do, right?
Yeah.
If Naughty Dog was just like, we really want to make a multiplayer experience, we think we can do something that's really, really fucking good,
I think even if they
and
do
we
though,
don't want to do single player anymore, and we're going
sure,
to do
right.
this,
But that's the thing
then
is I
fine.
don't think any of these studios want that. I think they want
No,
it to be a
whereas,
yes and.
whereas,
Well, yeah, we'll do both.
yeah,
And it's like you can't.
whereas Bungie clearly wanted to be the live service studio, they kind of invented that format with Destiny, and that was what they wanted to do. And they were funneled into that initial agreement with Activision of, well, you're going to make Destiny, you're going to make Destiny 2, we're going to have Destiny 3, we're going to have some DLC each year. They were following the Call of Duty format. But that was clearly not Bungie's vision. They wanted to have this one title that they continued to develop on. I don't think any of these studios want that. I don't think that's what they're good at. I think you should let people make the games they want to make. I would imagine that the reason we're not getting a Ratchet and Clank game, like you said, is because the studio wants to make these Marvel games, and everyone there's probably really excited at the fact that they've got the X-Men IP until 2035, and no one else is going to be making an X-Men game. So,
And there's never been like a good one really. Like it's like there was like there's never been a marquee Wolverine video game in the way that there have
mhm,
been for like Spider-Man, right? Like there was the X-Men Origins Wolverine game that was made by Raven that was cool or whatever, but it was a tie into a shitty movie, so nobody played it. Um yeah, like I get it. I get why they want to do that cuz it's a bigger stage for them, right? Like they've gotten so much attention for making the Spider-Man games and like for how good they are, and I think the idea that it's like any less creatively satisfying doesn't appear to be there, right? Like they seem to
yeah.
love making those games. So like why not keep that going, right? And then like when you do shift back to making new IP in, 2031 or whatever, that like it's after coming off of multiple game of the year
And,
contenders
uh,
and
and
having
everyone's really excited about it, yeah, like, then
uh-huh,
you're just like, "Oh, it's the studio that made Spider-Man and Venom
and
and
it's new,
and
right?
Wolverine," yeah.
It's not just and it's another Ratchet and Clank, right? Which
I
is
don't know,
like
though, I do think that Spider-Man: The Great Web document is fresh, is recent. If you look at some of the other stuff that we've not spoken about, the internal slides on the gaming industry, where they talk about an industry shift, Microsoft acquisition of
yeah,
Activision Blizzard and all
saw
that stuff.
that.
It's from the same presentation. It's the same background. It's the same font. It's the same presentation. It's just different slides from that presentation. So they're talking about like a threat from Call of Duty and what they need to do in order to kind of mitigate this. And my guess would be that they're worried that they don't have anything to mitigate that risk, and Spider-Man: The Great Web potentially could be that game that would mitigate that risk.
It
My
could. I
concern
guess the
is
question is, do they still believe in that though? Right? Because it's like I agree with you about the timeline of this, like, but my question is that new timeline that we're looking at, right? Does that not have the multiplayer stuff on it because it's all been canceled, or is it just because it's not?
it could just be that's the single player stuff, and the other one was marked as secret, so maybe it's people that don't know about that.
It's also possible that there are more slides in that document that we just aren't seeing, right? Because
Yeah.
like the other slides are part of a group of 3, so that's also possible. Like, who knows? But like, I don't think it's crazy to think that these don't come. to pass, that they don't ever materialize. And like I think
Yeah,
if any of them were going to, I think you're probably right that Spider-Man makes the most sense because it probably has the best chance to connect with a mass market and actually make money. But I don't know, dude.
I
I
think
just
not releasing that, if they don't release that PC day and date, if that is a game that they go with,
yeah.
gonna do such a massive disservice to that game.
Mhm.
That needs to come to multiple platforms. That's
Definitely.
the reason Call of Duty succeeds. It comes to everything. You can play
Right.
it everywhere.
Exactly. It's the only way you can build an audience for a multiplayer game like that. Really, really, you know? But I don't know. I just like I really wonder if they really are gonna commit to this anymore. Like, or if they're gonna decide that it's too risky. Because like, yeah, there's this bit in the slide about how some of the Sony pillars are already out. There's this thing where they're saying that they're already old fashioned and like they need to innovate and blah 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 blah. But like
Mhm.
I think pivoting to live service is already an old move. Like I genuinely believe that the industry is moving away from that model.
I do too, but they're also worried about the threat to PlayStation Plus, which is currently $1.5 billion of annual revenue currently, that they would then have to fill that hole. And the way you get people to subscribe to PlayStation Plus, you make multiplayer games that people want to play.
Sure.
If I can play Call of Duty day and date for free over on Xbox because I get it with my Game Pass subscription, I don't need to pay you $70 for that game and then also pay you 100 and some dollars a year for a PlayStation Plus subscription. And I kind of just get the game. I'm possibly likely to go down that route instead.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would probably cancel my PlayStation Plus subscription if I still had it.
But I guess the other question though is right, like they are talking about investing all this money into these multiplayer games and into new initiatives for to develop these live service titles. Who's to say that you couldn't just take that same money and invest it in more single player stuff or some of these smaller games that
Doesn't
take
get you to subscribe to PS Plus unless you
it
bring
does
them
if
day and
you
date.
it does if you make it part of the the rollout, right? With what's it called? The
PlayStation Plus Premium.
yeah, all those freaking insane tiers, right?
Mm.
That's how you do it, right? You make it where it's like, okay, well, maybe even if you don't do the day and date thing like Xbox does, you just have it where you have a higher volume of these games coming out that get people to subscribe.
I genuinely don't know why they don't do the day and date thing and just be like, "We're doubling the price if you want these games day and date, you're paying for it." Like, why is that just not a thing that they do, you know? Even Nintendo locks you in for a year if you buy the expansion pass for Switch Online. Just do that. You get the
Yeah.
money up front for the game. You know people are gonna be locked to your platform then for at least a year, and just give them the games that they want.
I don't know. I mean, I recognize we're probably oversimplifying things and be like, just put out more games, just do more of this, just do more of that. But my point is
No,
that like,
100% we are, yeah.
but point being, I think that putting all their eggs in that basket is also not a reasonable strategy. And if the argument here is they either need to make live service games or they're doomed, then they're doomed. And
I genuinely don't understand that though from their perspective. It's just so bizarre. I think they do need some kind of multiplayer stuff, right? They're really one of the big three that don't really have anything. You know, Nintendo was succeeded with Mario Kart and Splatoon, and people are subscribing to their online platform because you get all these old games included. And obviously, PlayStation tried to ape that with the PlayStation Plus like deluxe tier, and you got the retro games. Microsoft's got a bunch of multiplayer stuff. They own Minecraft. They've got Call of Duty now. Sony doesn't really have anything, and I think they do need to expand and look to do something. They've obviously been trying to do stuff with new IP, with the acquisition of Jade Raymond's studio and bringing all of that stuff in. Maybe that's the strategy. You get these studios who are built from the ground up to make these live service or multiplayer experiences, and you sell those to people, or you give them away. Like free to play should be part of their strategy, and it doesn't ever seem to cross their mind. It always seems to be, well, we've got to sell these games for $70. We're going to make a box copy and sell it for $70. I don't know many people who want to buy a multiplayer game. They just want to download it and they want to pay for skins and cosmetics and subscriptions and
yeah, but then
season
it's like
passes.
that is such a tough thing for a big publisher to do because then you need to have studios that all they do is support this one game. And
That's what they need. They bought
right, but what
Bungie.
happens if that game is bad? Like
Yeah.
it's just and it's I don't think that model makes sense. It's the same fucking thing that we've talked about with like why it didn't make sense for Disney to make video games and why they got out of video games, why it doesn't make sense for Amazon to make video games and why I assume that they will get out of it eventually and why Google didn't stick around because for big companies like it doesn't make sense to do that kind of thing. At least I don't think so, right? Because with a single player game, if the game comes out and it doesn't work, right, and it flops, you have whatever return you got, and you can either pivot that studio to their next project or you can close them down, right? But
They've
like,
gotta just be the only big publisher not doing it, though. You look at everyone else, EA, they've got one. You've got Ubisoft, they've got one. You look at, Embracer Group, they've got a ton of them they seem to shut
yeah,
down every single day. You know, all of these
it's just like
other
I think it's an easier
developers and
business
publishers
model
have
for
something.
them though because those games are going to come out multi-platform, right?
That's
Like,
the problem, they need to go multi-platform with the multiplayer experiences, and if
but
they
I guess
do
the
that,
question is like, do they though? Because it's like, is their business model to sell consoles, right?
no.
Yeah, it is though. It isn't for Xbox, but it is for PlayStation. And the argument that you're going to sell boxes with a multiplayer game is like, I don't really think that's what it is. I think it's you make a multiplayer game to make money on a multiplayer game. And I mean, that when it works, but it also can very easily not. Look at Destiny. Destiny is supposed to be unshakable. It's losing money and it could easily dry up when this last expansion comes out and they don't successfully transfer people over to the next thing. That's an easy thing that could happen. And that moment could just be over and that money could
Mhm.
just be gone. And, and I know that I sound like I'm a fanboy banging the drum for single player, but the difference is that single player games cost less to make too. You spend more time and more money making a big, high quality multiplayer game, and then you need to spend money to continue to support it forever.
Yeah, I mean,
And
there was a good
that's really
discussion
fucking
on
tough, man.
Digital Foundry's podcast, this week, which I recommend people go listen to. I mean, it was about, like, the death of the small single player experience. Why did Naughty Dog have to turn what was a great multiplayer experience with factions into a full-blown live service game that was separate, that then needed an entire studio to support it ongoing in perpetuity with new content to get people to stay in the
Because that's
game?
the only way that they make money, the way that people want multiplayer games to make money, right? Like, there was a whole wave of games back when Naughty Dog's original Last of Us factions came out,
Yeah,
where every game had a multiplayer mode, and that was at the time, model for, "This is how we'll get them to not sell the game back to GameStop and lose money on people buying
yeah.
used copies." And now, that's not the problem anymore. The problem is, "Oh, we need to make a multiplayer game so we can have a billion-dollar maker like Fortnite or Call of Duty." And
Which I
that
just
is
don't
a
understand.
fucking insane goal.
Why can't it be the goal is I want people to stay subscribed to PlayStation Plus and stay using their
I
PlayStation
think
and with their eyes on the screen?
it can be, but like again, how do you do that? It's like
Give out a free multiplayer experience. They just did a massive free DLC for God of War Ragnarok that added a whole new mode and a bunch of new content. Why can't you just be like, okay, the really massive, big single player multiplayer experience for The Last of Us is cancelled, but here's factions in The Last of Us Part 1. And you can download that and it's now part of it. Because we're getting the remaster of The Last of Us Part 2 on PlayStation next year with the lost levels and all of that. Chuck in the multiplayer experience. Just give it to us. You've already built the bloody thing on PlayStation 4.
yeah. I mean, you could. I don't know, man. I I think something like that I could see making sense, but that's because it's bringing back legacy content, which is like it's just
Mhm.
not the same thing. I don't know. Like I think at the end of the day, the bottom line for all this stuff is money, right? It's like this stuff
Yeah.
needs to make money, and I don't think putting a multiplayer mode in The Last of Us that isn't a live service game that you can spend money on in a season pass or whatever makes The Last of Us Part Two sell better. And if it doesn't do that, then what is the point? Because at a certain point, right? Like however you want to slice it, whether it's money, whether it's time, whatever, every decision you make at a game studio limits you making a different decision. So
Mhm.
deciding to put time and money into making a multiplayer version or mode for The Last of Us Part 2 that isn't going to increase sales, that isn't going to move the needle for the success of the product, either critically or commercially, then what is the point of it? Right? Because that's just time and money wasted. That's time that could have been put towards a Left Behind style DLC. That's time and money that could have been put towards another single player game, getting more people working on it. That could be time and money that could be spent towards a remake of Uncharted that'll sell like a new game. Those are better uses of their time. Those are all better uses of Naughty Dog's time than making a multiplayer mode. They just are. Unless that multiplayer mode comes out and erupts and takes the world over and becomes a huge driver of revenue, right? And A, that's a big if, my man. And B, as they pointed out, then you have to have either the entire arm of that studio, or maybe in the case of somebody like Insomniac, where they are already bigger, half, right? And that's conservative. Like it's probably
Yeah.
more than that of the studio pivot to supporting that one game rather than working on new games, right? And that's not only just, with like Insomniac, maybe doing new IP, right? Doing another Marvel character, doing these other things that could become multi-million sellers like Spider-Man. It's also something with Naughty Dog, like making a new IP, which you can then make into a new franchise, which you can then re-release, which you can then make an HBO series off of, that you can then make merch off of. Like it, all of that stuff should be factored in, right? Because like there are more ways to monetize a game than putting out a single game. And I think Sony's shown that through the money they've made on Miles, through the money they've made on remakes of Last of Us and stuff like that. Like they've figured out ways to leverage games to last longer and make more money and have a bigger footprint aside from multiplayer. And I hope that they see that because I think it is a real mistake for them to have a studio like Insomniac pivot a huge portion of their energy towards making multiplayer games. Because I think it is just something that is not going to have legs in the long term and is not going to be a thing you can hang your hat on and come back to the way you could with like Spider-Man Remastered, for example, as well, right? A game that came out in 2018. They resold it again on PC where it did really well. And then they just resold it again on PS5 where it did really well. Like that to me is what they should be focusing on, right? Is how do we take something like a Spider-Man 2 and cash in on it multiple times so that the investment that we made is more than just whatever its sales are in the first year it comes out.
I completely agree with you, and I think that's why DLC was invented, right? It pays for the development and sucks up the cost. I've just pasted another more stuff comes out constantly, and I'm sure it will continue to do so. But these are more documents from that same slideshow talking about the Great Web. They have a timeline in here: R&D in 2021 and 2022, pre-production on the game in 2022,
Oh,
2023.
this concept art looks cool.
Oh yeah, wait till if you scroll down and click show more, there's like the sample roadmap is based on issues of comics. And each season will be like season one, issue one was Venomous Volition, then it's Madness in Mysterio. They've got like all sorts of battle pass stuff. Like they've really thought this game out.
Cool.
It's definitely been in pre-production. Whether they ramp up to full
And it goes
production
all the way to
now, I guess
2030, which is crazy.
it does, yeah. They have a plan in place for seasons 1 to season 8 with 2 teams, a fall team and a spring team working on it at, any given time, so, it's quite possible. It's codenamed I-32.
Who
So,
knows? I mean, this is like I said, if any of them are going to come to pass, this one makes the most sense, right?
yeah, and this is a release in 2026 if it does happen. Should be the same year as Wolverine,
Which isn't happening.
but
So
we
that's
don't
the
know
other
that.
thing, right? Is like they did think this out, but like they're already behind.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know that it's not gonna happen, and they could be using the exact same city that they've already built for Spider-Man and for Venom, and you bring that forward and you carry on and you make this game. You know, the character model is really cool as well, and the different archetypes. I think this game looks really cool. If it does happen, I think this might be that
This could be
game,
the
that
one.
multiplayer Spider-Man game that you've been looking for. Yeah.
Hey, man, I I'd be happy to be wrong, right? If it comes out and it's actually good, great. But I don't know, dude. I don't know. It's tough. It's
Yeah.
tall order. Tall order. But this is an idea that makes a lot more sense to me than some of the others that have been presented. But like, I thought the Last of Us factions made sense too. So
Each season being a comic book though, like, that's so cool, and they've all got,
yeah,
like, seasonal events within them, like, it's such a cool idea.
in theory.
Yeah, in theory, but, you know, what
Here's my
if
thing
they've
though.
got
What is
they've
the
got
moment
the
to moment
people there.
gameplay in that, right? There's the boss battles that they showed off, but then is it like going and doing like little side missions, which is the thing that everybody says is the most boring part of that game besides me? I don't know.
They say there's a story. There's a story, there's a battle pass, new mechanics, new characters, a
Yeah.
villain scheme experience, different dimensions to go into.
Yeah.
There's a 5-hour quest line
There's a lot you
on
could do with it.
Act 2.
I don't
Yeah.
know. We'll see. I mean, I really like Insomniac as a studio. So like, they're one where like they can figure it out. They know how to make stuff that's fun, and I
Mhm.
give them that. So I won't sit here and say it's impossible, but I think we both said our piece, right? I think it's clear where we land. So um, I I hope that either they pivot and that this never comes to fruition, or if this does come to fruition, that this is the one that uh has some legs, I guess, but I also worry that, like, if it's successful, then it becomes "Okay, great, this is the proof that this can work," and can it though, or is Spider-Man just popular?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't
It's,
know.
uh it's a weird one. Apparently the concept arts in that, document I gave you were done by Visceral.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
didn't they
It's
get shut down?
oh my god, yeah, right? Yeah, I forgot about that. I think you're right, though.
Yeah. No, they can't have been done by Visceral then. That was done
No,
in 2017.
Steve, it could be. This is the whole problem. It could be extremely old.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, it could be, like, concept art done way back in the day.
I
Oh,
don't know.
maybe it's the archetypes they're talking about that was pulled from 2017 game that Visceral worked on.
Ah, gotcha, gotcha. Okay,
Mhm.
that makes sense. Because the art scale thing, right,
Yeah.
with the Hulk?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So just
They're just
crediting
shoving that in. Yeah.
okay, fair enough. Anyway, we'll leave it there for the day. If you guys wanna let us know what you think about this or any of the other stuff we discussed on today's show, make sure you write into us questions at flipscreen.games. Flipscreen.games is the website. You can come join the Discord, keep the conversation rolling between episodes, be there for the conversation when stories like these break because we were talking about it with people in the Discord well before we sat down to record today. So, definitely worth your time to come hang out if you want a place to chat games, in a fun, inclusive environment. Definitely come hang out with us over there. And of course, like I said, flipscreen.games, that's a website. However you choose to get involved, that's where you should go. Go and click on some stuff, show your support, become a patron, however you choose to get involved. We thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Flipscreen Games podcast. Remember, this is our last regular episode of the year, but it is not our last show of the year. We have a major event next week, the Flipscreen Games annual number 2, where we will be having a epic game show showdown. Flipscreen Games Mania. Make sure you go and tune in. You're not going to want to miss it. Any final thoughts, Steve, for the kids for the year?
Just thank you all so much for listening and contributing to the community and just being here. It's always really humbling to have different people write in and engage with us and just listen to the show. Like, I don't know. It feels like sometimes we just talk. Me and you're just having a conversation as friends, and it's just the cameras on and the mics are on, and the fact that people want to listen to that is fun, even though if we argue and disagree half the time. And next year, Pete, is the year I win a game. I am determined to win something in
Boy,
2024.
man, I hope so. I hope so for your case. That's when you know it's bad when your greatest rival starts to root for you. It's like I hope you get a W2,
You know,
buddy.
I'm getting the predictions. We'll recap in January and figure out who won the predictions for 2023. Spoiler, it wasn't me. And we can figure out the new predictions for 2024.
Yeah, I hope, I wish you the best, I hope that you, will be able to get a W, but I feel like you and I are very quickly approaching a, like, Harlem Globetrotters versus Washington Generals situation where, I'm doing backflips, I'm dunking off of, I'm jumping off ladders and stuff, I'm putting on Spider-Man masks and throwing basketballs behind my head, and you're just bunch of white guys that couldn't make it in the Italian league, I don't
Look,
know.
I know I am very aware I am terrible at all of the games that we've put forward. I need to come up with some kind of game that
You
I
need
am
to invent a
guaranteed to
game
win.
where you have an
Yeah, I'm gonna
advantage.
invent a game that I'm gonna win. It's gonna be like, I don't know, programming challenges, and you'll have to, like, figure out some code or whatever, and we'll do that. Yeah, let's do that. Or
Who am
it'll
I
be
playing
Pete.
against? Because if you
It'll
put the
be
game
Pete.
together, you can't compete. So then I'm just gonna clown on Max or whoever else can't
You
code.
know
I'll
what? That
figure
would
it
be
out.
so fun. Like, I'd love to, like, come up with something on, like, the Steam Deck podcast or whatever, like, where you have to figure out how to install Chiaki on your own without looking at anything.
Not a chance. I'll cheat if you want. Yeah, I mean, I can win if I can cheat. Anyway, thank you guys for joining us for another show. It's been the longest outro I think we've ever done. Thank you guys for joining us for another one. I echo Steve's sentiments. Thank you for another great year. Thank you guys for supporting the show. It's been a really great year for the show and for the channel in general. You guys have shown an incredible amount of support for what we've been doing. And we've got some really, really exciting stuff lined up for next year as well. So I hope you are as excited as we are to be a part of it. So thanks again for tuning in for the crew. I've been Pete. He's been Steve. We'll see you next week.